Okay, and in this set of problems, we look at problems from Chapter 6 dealing with calculating risk premiums. Just as a reminder, the Treasury bond yield is defined as the real risk-free rate plus the inflation premium plus the maturity risk premium. The corporate bond yields are defined as the real risk-free rate plus the inflation premium plus the maturity risk premium plus a default risk premium plus a liquidity premium. The corporate bond yield spread is defined as the corporate bond yield minus the Treasury bond yield, which is of course equal to the default risk premium plus the liquidity premium. In the first problem, we determine the real risk-free rate. 30-day Treasury bills are yielding 2.94%. The inflation premium is 1.8%. The liquidity premium is 0.5%. The maturity risk premium is 0%. And the default risk premium is 2.15%. What is the real risk-free rate of return? Well, as we just finished saying, the Treasury bond yield will be equal to the real risk-free rate plus the inflation premium plus the maturity risk premium. The Treasury bond yield is given as 2.84%, and that's equal to the real risk-free rate plus the 1.8% of the inflation premium plus the 0% of the maturity risk premium. A little algebra tells us that the risk-free rate is 1.04%. Next, we determine a corporate bond yield. 3-year Treasury bonds are yielding 3.94%. The inflation premium is 1.8%. Liquidity premium is 0.5%, the maturity risk premium is 1%, and the default risk premium is 2.15%. What should the corporate 3-year bond yield? Well, the difference between the corporate bond yield and the Treasury bond yield is, of course, the default risk premium and the liquidity premium. So to find the corporate bond yield, we just take the Treasury bond yield and add the default risk premium and the liquidity premium. So we take the T-bond yield of 3.94%, add 2.15% for the default risk premium, and 0.5% for the liquidity premium, equaling a corporate bond yield of 6.59%. Next, we look at calculating the default risk premium. A Treasury bond that matures in 5 years has a yield of 5%. A 5-year corporate bond has a yield of 6.75%. The liquidity premium on the corporate bond is 0.25%. What is the default risk premium on the corporate bond? Well, the difference between the corporate bond yield and the Treasury bond yield is the corporate bond yield spread, which is equal to the default risk premium plus the liquidity premium. So if we take the corporate bond yield of 6.75% and subtract the 5% of the T-bond yield, that should be equal to the combination of the default risk premium and the liquidity premium. So 1.75% is equal to the default risk premium plus the liquidity premium of 0.25%, implying that the default risk premium is equal to 1.5%. Next, we look at a couple of maturity risk problems. The real risk-free rate is 2%. Inflation is expected to be 1.8% a year for the next 2 years, and a 2-year Treasury bond yields 4%. What is the maturity risk premium? Well, the T-bond yield should be equal to the real risk-free rate plus the inflation premium plus the maturity risk premium. The 2-year Treasury bond yield is given as 4%, the real risk-free rate is given as 2%, and the inflation premium is 1.8%. So the maturity risk premium must be equal to 0.2%. Our second maturity risk problem is a little more involved. We have an investor that expects inflation to be 1.8% this following year and 2.5% a year thereafter. The real risk-free rate is 2%. 3-year Treasury bonds yield 5%, 5-year Treasury bonds yield 6%. What is the difference in the maturity risk premiums between the two Treasury bonds? Well, the 3-year Treasury bond yield should be equal to the risk-free rate plus the inflation premium over 3 years plus the maturity risk premium over 3 years, while the 5-year Treasury bond yield should be equal to the risk-free rate plus the inflation premium over 5 years plus the maturity risk premium over 5 years. So in order to answer the problem, the first thing we need to do is to find the estimated inflation premiums for 3 years and for 5 years separately. The inflation premium of 3 years, we take 1 plus 0.018 or 1.8% multiplied by 1 plus 2.5% for 2 years. So this will reflect 3 years of inflation. Then we take, after multiplying these, we take the third root and subtract 1. When we do that, we end up with a 3-year inflation premium of 2.27%. For the 5-year, we take next year's inflation of 1.8% and add it to 1, and multiply it by 2.5% a year for the next 4 years, plus 1. Then we take the fifth root and subtract 1, yielding an inflation premium over 5 years of 2.36% per year. So now we can say that the 3-year T-bond yield is going to be 2% plus 2.27%, plus the maturity risk premium over 3 years, while the 5-year T-bond yield will be 2% plus 2.36% plus the maturity risk premium over 5 years. The 3-year T-bond yield is 5%, which will be equal to 2% real risk-free rate plus 2.27% for the 3-year inflation premium plus the maturity risk premium over 3 years, while the 5-year T-bond yield, which is equal to 6%, will be equal to 2% plus 2.36% inflation premium plus a maturity risk premium over 5 years. The maturity risk premium over 3 years will thus be equal to 5 minus 4.27%, or 0.73%. The maturity risk premium over 5 years will be equal to 6% minus 4.36%, for 1.64%. So the difference between the two will be 1.64% minus 0.73%, or 0.91%.